To work out the estimate for the mean, first of all we need to add an extra column with our midpoints in. This would be 200, 300, 400, 500 and 600. Now we add a next column with frequency times our midpoints. 200, 3,300, 2,000, 0 and 1,800. So we've multiplied our frequency by our midpoint. Now we can total up our frequency times midpoint column, and that gives us 7,300. We know that there was a total of 20 people. So now we need to work out 7,300 divided by 20. We know that that is the same as 730 divided by 2, which is then the same as 365. You might need to use bus stop method for that if you couldn't do it in your head. Part B then asks why the mean might not be a good average to use. So we can see that there are 3 people on a much higher wage compared to the majority of the people. So these could be managers, for example. So these are known as outliers because they are making our mean quite high. Because you can see the majority of people have actually paid between 150 and 450. And 365 is very close to that upper limit. The majority of people, the mode for the data was actually between 250 and 350. So the mean might not be a very good average to use here because you have these 3 outliers, which are obviously the managers who are on much higher pay. On question 6, we've got a rectangle. We know opposite sides are equal in a rectangle. So straight away we can write 2x plus 6 equals to 5x minus 9. Now we've got an equation we can solve to find x. We get rid of the lower or the smaller amount of x from both sides. That leaves us with 6 is equal to 3x minus 9. Now we can add 9 to both sides, which will get us to 3x is 15. And then that allows us to work out that x must be 5. If we know that x is 5, then this side of the rectangle must be 16. 16 times by this y has to equal to our area. So 16 times y is equal to 48. So therefore y has to equal to 3. Because if you divide 48 by 16, you get the answer 3. So our next question, one thing which is incorrect with her graph, well, she hasn't used a smooth curve. She's joined these up with a straight line, and we know quadratics are joined up with a smooth curve. This next question, we've got to understand what recurring decimals are. So because the dot is in front of the, or on top of the 4 and the 6 on the first one, we know that this would go 4, 6, 4, 6. The next one, we know it must just go 6, 6, 6, da 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 da. The next one, it's over the 2 and the 6. That means everything is repeated between the 2 dots. So 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6, and so on. And then this one, we could just use zeros because there's no reoccurring part. Now we know which one's the smallest. It must be the one without the reoccurring part because 0 is the smallest looking at your 4th decimal place. The next smallest would be the 0.246 because your 4th decimal place is 2. The next smallest would be 0.246 with the dots above the 4 and the 6 because your 4th decimal place is 4. And then finally that leaves you with 2.46 with the recurring part above the 6. Question 9. So it tells you that James and Peter cycle the same 50 kilometres route. It takes James 2.5 hours to cycle that 50 kilometres. So we know that James' time is 2.5 2.5 hours. His distance is 50 kilometres. So now we can work out our speed. We know that speed is distance divided by time. So 50 divided by 2.5. We know that that must be 20 kilometres per hour. And that is his speed. It then tells you that Peter started to cycle 5 minutes after James did, and he caught up with him after they'd cycled 15 kilometres. So now we need to work out what James's time was after 15 kilometres. We know that his speed was 20, his distance was 15. So to work out our time, again, using our speed, distance, time triangle, it must be the distance divided by the speed. 15 over 20 is the same as 3/4. So he took 45 minutes. Okay, 3/4 of an hour is exactly the same as 45 minutes. We know that Peter cycled 5 minutes after James and he caught up with him. So Peter only took 45 subtract 5, so 40 minutes to cycle the 15 kilometres. So again, we've got our distance, we've got our time. We have to be careful because we need to change our time into hours. 40 minutes is 40 over 60 hours because there's 60 minutes in an hour. That's the same as 4 over 6 hours or 2/3 of an hour. So now we've got his time converted into hours, we can use our speed distance time triangle. So speed is equal to our distance divided by time. 15 divided by 2/3. We know to flip and times our fraction when we are dividing. So then that will leave us with 45 over 2 kilometres per hour, which is the same as 22.5 kilometres per hour. Either answer is perfectly acceptable in your exam. I would leave it as a fraction because it would require less maths. Question 10, we know that to the power of a half is just the square root, so the square root of 10 is 100. Part B, 125, we can raise that to the power of 1/3 and then square it. So all I've done is I've separated my 2/3 into a third and then the 2. The third means the cube root of 125. Well, the cube root of 125 is 5. 5 squared is then 25. Question 11. This is forming and solving simultaneous equations. So we have got 3 teas plus 2 coffees, and that works out at £7.80, or 5 teas and 4 coffees, which is £14.20. Because there isn't a matching number in front of either our t's or our c's, we're going to have to multiply one of our equations. I'm going to multiply the top one by 2 so that my c part matches. So I've got 6t plus 4c, which is equal to £15.60. So I've doubled all of this first one. I've now got 2 equations which I can use. I'm going to take my new equation, which I'm going to label as equation 3, away from my equation 2. I've done this just so that I don't have any minuses. 6t take away 5t is 1t, 4c take away 4c is nothing, £15.60 take away £14.20 is £1.40. So straight away I've worked out my t is £1.40. Now I can substitute it in to work out my cost of my coffee. So I'm going to use t equals £1.40 into equation 2. So I had 5t, so I've got to do 5 times £1.40 plus this 4c is equal to £14.20. Now 5 times £1.40 is equal to £7, plus 4c is £14.20. Subtract the 7 and I'm left with £7.20. So now I need to divide both sides by 4. This is a tricky calculation, so I'm going to use my bus stop method for this. 4s into 7 go once, with a remainder of 3. 4s into 32 go 8 times, and then 4s into 0, 0. So therefore my coffee must be £1.80.